2 layers of crunchy cocoa wafers and a thick layer of sweet cream that holds them together. That's what Oreos are made of. The construction isn't rocket science, but the result is so damn delicious. And with 40 billion Oreos being produced each year, we can be sure that there are more people out there who think the same. While they were introduced more than a century ago, they remain ultra popular today. It is the best-selling cookie brand in the United States, and they are available in over 100 countries. Over the years, many varieties of these delicious cookies have been produced, and limited edition runs have become immensely popular. With some packs being listed for hundreds and even thousands of dollars on eBay. Along with the classic black and white cookie, the brand is constantly filling grocery store shelves with innovative, tasty flavors, such as carrot cake, peanut butter, mint, and pistachio. Or what do you think of the more unusual flavors like Swedish fish, root beer float, and wasabi? You name it, Oreo has it. And while not all flavors have been a hit, sometimes for pretty obvious reasons, the brand continues to make billions each year. For decades, knockoffs such as JoJo's, Numino's, and Who Knew have been trying to get a piece of the pie, but nobody comes close to the Oreo powerhouse. Not too bad for a cookie that was once nothing more than a knockoff itself, and only got created due to a heated sibling rivalry. Curious to find out what we're talking about? Then don't miss this video. Before we delve into this juicy story and uncover this cookie's dark history, I have a little question. How do you eat your Oreos? Share it in the comments. You see, similar to the famous Kit Kat dispute on whether you break or bite the candy bar, many are also divided on the proper way to eat these delicious cookies. When it comes to Oreos, there are supposedly 3 distinct camps: the twisters, the dunkers, and the breakers. True Oreo lovers will know which one they belong to, or perhaps they belong to all 3 of them at once. But even those who have never heard these words before have most likely tasted the chocolate goods at least once in their lifetime. To be honest with you, I'm usually a fast snacker who tends to bite right in. But according to Oreo's U.S. marketing director, Marian Delgado-Sainin, there is in fact an official and correct way to enjoy an Oreo: the twist, lick, and dunk method. It is the Oreo team's tried and true approach, and it involves twisting the cookie halves in part, trying the layer of cream, and then dunking the Oreo into some milk. All fine and dandy, but in this video, it is not the correct way of eating these layers cookies that will be the center of debate. Instead, we will be focused on something that's a little less well known, namely the brand's dark past and sneaky tactics. It is a story filled with manipulation and deceit, and one that underlines the importance of good marketing and branding. By the end of this video, you will never look at these little copycat cookies the same way again. Ready to have your world turned upside down? Uncover Oreo's dark history and learn a thing or two about how not to brand your company. Then keep watching. The full story starts in the 1800s, decades before the Oreo was invented, when brothers Jacob and Joseph Luce emptied their bank accounts and opened a bakery together in Kansas City, Missouri, a state in the Midwestern region of the United States. The Luce brothers' bakery was thriving, and Jacob, who had a knack for the business end of things, knew that merging with more bakeries in the Midwest would be necessary to further expand the company. He had already seen how giant monopolies for goods like oil, tobacco, and sugar ruled the markets, and realized that it was their merging together that allowed them to gain even more capital than ever before. This merging of businesses to operate as a single entity is also called conglomerating. At the time, it was still a new practice, but it didn't take long for it to become a trend. Not wanting to be left out, Jacob quickly hired a lawyer named Adolphus Green, and through their acquisitions, they created the American Biscuit and Manufacturing Company. Back then, it was the second largest bakery in the U.S., and things were going well. Jacob became president, and he appointed Adolphus as general counsel and gave his brother Joseph a seat on the board. However, running a giant bakery company turned out to be quite tiring, and for the next 7 years, Jacob and his lawyer Adolphus were competing with the 2 other major bakeries in America in a race to the bottom price war. Those 7 years of constant competing depleted Jacob, and he became seriously ill. To recover, he moved to Europe, and in his absence, his brother Joseph took over. As you can guess, things were about to change drastically. Joseph was pleased that he was finally the one in charge and enjoyed his new position of power and the obligations that came with it. In contrast to his brother, he thought the best way to conclude the raging price war was to merge with the other two major bakery companies and form an even bigger biscuit company. However, Jacob vehemently disagreed. He refused to merge together with the same two conglomerates who had driven him to his sickbed in the first place, and he wrote several letters asking his brother to reconsider. Unfortunately, from so far away, there wasn't much he could do to stop him. So while Jacob was healing in Europe, Joseph and Adolphus pushed the merger deal through and created the National Biscuit Company, which is now known as Nabisco. Jacob wasn't pleased, and once recovered and well, he decided to get back in the game. However, this time it would not be with the National Biscuit Company. Instead, he struck out on his own. He found a new partner and started a bakery from scratch called the Loose Wiles Biscuit Company, which would later be known as the Sunshine Biscuits Company. Jacob used everything he had learned from the industry thus far, and after 10 years, Sunshine Biscuits became the second largest bakery in the U.S. after Nabisco. In 1908, the company launched what would become its signature product, and it would turn out to be a true winner that all consumers loved. It was called the Hydrox, and it had a familiar composition: 2 biscuits with vanilla cream in the center. Can you guess where this is going? The cookie was initially sold as an exotic English biscuit twist, and its design was quite interesting for its era. Thanks to an industrial press from a mold, it took on the look of a flower. Things were going well for Jacob and his Sunshine Company, but 4 years later, Joseph's Nabisco came out with a suspiciously similar cookie. It was called the Oreo. Up until now, Hydrox had been a huge hit. The cookie's design was iconic, and grocery stores were ordering multiple cases each month. Was that about to change? The Oreo cookie launched in 1912, 4 years after Hydrox had hit the market. By then, Hydrox was already known as the king of biscuits, and it didn't seem like Nabisco's copy-paste look-alike would be able to touch it. Nabisco hadn't been subtle about imitating Hydrox, and the Oreo even had a similar design, but the Oreo was priced cheaper and came off as a generic cookie, while the Hydrox remained the favorite. Nabisco essentially produced the Oreo at a loss, and for the years leading up to their deaths, each brother had their own victory: Jacob the Hydrox and Joseph the bigger company. But a couple of marketing and branding mistakes would eventually lead to Hydrox's downfall. One of Hydrox's mistakes was their strangely aggressive ads. In 1915, the company started making a big deal of Hydrox being the first, the original, and reminding customers that they shouldn't be fooled by the lookalikes. A real marketing no-no. In general, customers don't like being bullied and told what to do or believe. And instead of constantly yelling first, it would have been much smarter to simply explain why Hydrox was a better option. But while its aggressive ads did the brand no good, it was the name that ultimately took it down. While Hydrox had enjoyed a loyal customer base, in the years after the Oreo launched, the tides of the competition started to shift. If you thought Hydrox sounded like a chemical, you're not alone. The name had always had a more clinical feeling to it and reminded many of hydrogen peroxide, a chemical you don't really want to put in your mouth voluntarily, let alone frequently. It also didn't help that more and more cleaning and disinfecting companies were hitting the market with similar names, such as the Hydrox Chemical Company, which was already caught up in a trademark suit at the time over the use of the word Hydrox. In a last-ditch attempt to try and salvage its image, Sunshine Biscuit sued to try and get new brands to stop using the word, but the damage had already been done. So why had Jacob chosen this unusual name? Well, apparently the word Hydrox had been a misplaced mashup of hydrogen and oxygen, the two chemicals that make up water. With it, he had intended to hint at the basic purity of his product, but unfortunately, it wasn't perceived as such by the masses. When you see it spelled out like that, it seems like a pretty neat idea to give your cookies that name. But with branding, it's all about the visceral gut feeling that you get. Sure, you can try to explain what the real meaning behind something is, but we live in a fast-paced world, and by the time you're done giving your explanation, at least half of your potential customers will have already disappeared. getting their cookies from your competitor who has probably given them a less freaky-sounding name. Nabisco saw the shift in sentiment that was taking place, and the massive powerhouse company that it was, it quickly doubled down on Oreo's marketing. In the 1950s, an Oreo relaunch with a higher price point made them more expensive than Hydrox, and therefore also more premium-seeming. But while they were now branded as the highest-class biscuit, the takeover would still end up taking a few decades. For many years, the two competing manufacturers engaged in biscuit wars. Hydrox warned customers of imposters, and Nabisco execs stubbornly absorbed losses on the then unsuccessful Oreo. But thanks to Oreo's price hike, redesign, and aggressive ad campaign, sales began to turn around in the mid-1950s. Nabisco also began licensing Oreo for the use in other products, like cookies and cream ice cream, which legitimized the brand even further. Sunshine soon went belly up, and Hydrox seemed to be destined for the dustbin of history. Unfortunate, but I guess that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. For some years, Hydrox ping-ponged around to companies like American Tobacco Company, Keebler, and Kellogg's. But after a less than successful effort to fix the unfortunate name by rebranding the cookie as Droxy's, the product was removed from the market entirely in 2003. It was relaunched by Leaf Brands in 2015, but to this day, fears of discontinuation loom large in the minds of Hydrox lovers. Oreos, meanwhile, went on to become the best-selling cookie in the world. It became Milk's favorite cookie, and stormed ahead with a slew of innovations, such as the many creative and unusual Oreo flavors, tie-ins with McDonald's such as the Oreo McFlurry, highly sought-after Supreme varieties, and even glitter-filled Trolls versions. Today, Oreo is the world's most popular cookie. With regional varieties and limited-release flavors, the biscuit brand has been reigning supreme as the go-to sandwich cookie on supermarket shelves. More than 40 billion Oreos are produced every year, raking in a whopping $2 billion. But while Hydrox hasn't fared as well, the original cookie hasn't given up yet, and the feud continues. So far, the battle hasn't been any prettier the second time around. Leaf Brands, the company that reintroduced Hydrox in 2015, has been throwing not-so-subtle shade towards Oreos on its website by telling its customers not to eat a knockoff and calling attention to the fact that its cookies are darker chocolate and crunchier, with a less sweet filling. The company is also quick to point out that it uses real cane sugar, which is probably a way to distinguish itself from Oreos, which contain high-fructose corn syrup. In 2016, Hydrox promptly slapped a stamp on packaging that proclaims "Proudly Made in the USA" next to the American flag. And Leaf Brands released a statement asserting that Hydrox keeps jobs in the United States via manufacturing, while Oreo's current parent company, Mondelez International, was laying off U.S. workers in favor of moving some production to a Mexico-based plant. This was in response to President Trump criticizing the makers of Oreo for taking manufacturing outside the country. And that's not all. In 2018, events took a particularly nasty turn between the rival cookie manufacturers when Leaf Brand filed a lawsuit against Mondelez International, seeking $800 million, or 670 million euros, in damages because of lost sales and reputation. The charges claim that Mondelez was using its massive industry muscle to place their own products in favorable locations in stores and move competitors to less desirable positions on store shelves. As proof of Mondelez's alleged wrongdoing, Hydrox posted pictures from grocery stores on their Facebook page in which their cookies were obscured behind other products and moved into shelves outside customers' direct line of sight. In several images, the cookies had been scooted to the back of shelves and even stacked the wrong way so that only the tips of the bag remains visible. And finally, in yet another bizarre twist, in 2020, President Trump also made a second appearance in Hydrox's history, as Google searches of Hydrox cookies started soaring after his talk of hydroxychloroquine for treating COVID-19. Whether it was autocomplete or just people understandably not knowing how to spell hydroxychloroquine, searches for the delicious cookie took off immediately after the talk. I guess their unfortunate name has turned out to be useful after all. For now, the battle for biscuit supremacy continues, And while no one knows for sure where the two brands will stand in several decades, right now, Oreo is definitely the one that most people think of when you tell them to imagine a sandwich cookie that consists of two chocolate discs with a sweet cream filling in between. Whether Oreo deserves its #1 spot can be disputed, but you can't say they don't have an impressive marketing and branding strategy going for them. With many impassioned fans on either side of the cookie aisle, it is safe to say that the debate and cookie war are fated to rage on for the next 100 years. Which one of the two is your favorite? This was the story of a heated sibling rivalry and the copycat revenge cookie that managed to outshine the original. It goes to show that branding and marketing can make or break a company. Because even though it was once the original, to everyone who doesn't know the history, Hydrox now seems like the knockoff generic cookie, while Oreo is world famous. What did you learn from this story? Make sure to share it in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video and see you tomorrow in the next one. And don't forget to check out our channel for more inspiring business videos.